The territory that now constitutes the autonomous community of Catalonia in Spain was first settled during the Middle Paleolithic. Like the rest of the Mediterranean side of the Iberian Peninsula, the area was occupied by the Iberians, and several Greek and Carthaginian towns were established on the coast before the Roman conquest. The area that is now Catalonia was the first area part of Hispania conquered by the Romans. It then came under Visigothic rule after collapse of the western part of the Roman Empire. In 718, the area was occupied by the Moors and became a part of Muslim-ruled Al-Andalus. The Frankish Empire conquered the area from the Muslims, beginning with the conquest of Roussillon in 760 and ending with the conquest of Barcelona in 801, as part of the creation of a larger buffer zone of Christian counties known as the Marca Hispanica. In time, the counties of the region gave up their allegiance to the rulers of the Franks and the successors and became attached, as a self-governing principality under the Count of Barcelona, to the Crown of Aragon. The Principality of Catalonia became the main base for the Crown of Aragon's naval power and expansionism that spread into Valencia, the Balearic Islands, and later into Sardinia, Sicily, Naples, and, briefly, Athens. An identifiably Catalan culture developed in the later Middle Ages under the hegemony of the Counts of Barcelona. The marriage of Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile in 1469 laid the foundations for a unified crown of Spain. In 1492, the Emirate of Granada, the last political entity of Al-Andalus in the peninsula, was conquered and the Spanish discovery and conquest of the Americas began. Political power began to shift away from the Crown of Aragon towards Castile. For a considerable time, Catalonia retained its own laws as a principality of the Crown of Aragon, but this came to an end when the new Bourbon dynasty secured the throne of Spain in the War of Spanish Succession and made the former Crown of Aragon territories into provinces of the Crown of Castile following the war. During the war, Catalonia had supported the claim of a member of the Austrian branch of the Habsburg dynasty from 1702. Following the surrender of Catalan troops on September 11, 1714, Philip V enacted the Nueva Planta decrees banning all the main traditional Catalan political institutions and rights and merged its administration into that of the Crown of Castile as a province. However, the Bourbon monarchy allowed for Catalonia's civil law code to be maintained. With the exception of the loyal Basque country, the new Bourbon king, Philip V of Spain, abolished the ancient privileges of all of Spain's medieval kingdoms, including the Crown of Aragon and with it, those of the Principality of Catalonia. Following the model of France, he imposed a unifying legislation and administration across Spain, as well as introducing the French Salic law and founding Spain's own Royal Academy in 1714. This led to the eclipse of Catalan as a language of government and literature. Economically, Catalonia experienced commercial growth in the late 18th century when the Bourbons ended Castile's trade monopoly with Spain's American colonies. The Napoleonic occupation and war in Spain in the early 19th century began a period of political and economic turmoil. In the latter half of the 19th century, Catalonia became a center of industrialization. In the first third of the 20th century, Catalonia several times enjoyed and lost varying degrees of autonomy like other parts of Spain until the Second Spanish Republic confirmed the autonomies of Spain's traditional autonomous regions, including the autonomy of Catalonia and the official use of its language. Like Madrid, the Basque Country and much of Spain, Catalonia fought hard to defend the Second Spanish Republic in the devastating Civil War of 1936 to 1939. With the defeat of the Spanish Republic by the right-wing forces of Francisco Franco, the autonomies were cancelled and regional languages like Catalan were made illegal. A great effort was made by Franco's regime to crush all regional cultures, languages and identities within Spain, but without success. The Catalan language, like other regional languages, continued to be used in private. In the years after the Civil War, life was difficult, with Spain devastated and cut off from international trade by boycotts. Catalonia, as a commercial and industrial centre, suffered severely. The economic recovery was very slow, and it was not until the mid-1950s that the economy reached the pre-war levels of 1936. In 1959 to 1974, Spain experienced the second fastest economic expansion in the world in what became known as the Spanish Miracle, and Catalonia prospered greatly from the expansion as Spain's most important industrial and tourist zone. In 1975, Franco died, bringing to an end his dictatorial regime, and in 1978 Catalonia voted overwhelmingly for the new democratic Spanish constitution that recognized Catalonia's autonomy and language. Prehistory in Catalonia. The first known human settlements in what is now Catalonia were at the beginning of the Middle Paleolithic. The oldest known trace of human occupation is a mandible found in Banyuls, described by some sources as pre-Neanderthal, some 200,000 years old. Other sources suggest it to be only about one-third that old. Some of the most important prehistoric remains were found in the caves of Molle, the Ciudad in the Montgri mountain, the remains at Fondi en Chagrenes and the shelters Romani and Agate, while those of the Upper Paleolithic are found at Reclau Viva, the cave of Varbreda and Labora Grande en Carreras in Serrania, or the Ciudad de les Gorges in Sant Julià de Ramis. For the next prehistoric era, the Upper Paleolithic and Mesolithic, important remains survive, the greater part dated between 8000 BC and 5000 BC, such as those of St. Gregory and El Filador. The Neolithic era began in Catalonia around 4500 BC, although the population was slower to develop fixed settlements than in other places, thanks to the abundance of woods, which allowed the continuation of a fundamentally hunter-gatherer culture. The most important Neolithic remains in Catalonia are the Cave of Font Major, the Cave of Toll, the Caves Gran and Frida, and the shelters of Kogel and Ulldecona. The Chalcolithic or Eneolithic period developed in Catalonia between 2500 and 1800 BC, with the beginning of the construction of copper objects. The Bronze Age occurred between 1800 and 700 BC. There are few remnants of this era, but there were some known settlements in the Low Segre zone. The Bronze Age coincided with the arrival of the Indo-Europeans through the Urnfield culture, whose successive waves of migration began around 1200 BC, and they were responsible for the creation of the first proto-urban settlements. Around the middle of the 7th century BC, the Iron Age arrived in Catalonia. The rise of the Iberian culture, an iron-using culture, first appeared in eastern Iberia in the 8th century BC. By the 5th century BC, the Iron Age Iberian civilization had become consolidated on the eastern side of the Iberian Peninsula. What is now the Catalan territory was home to several distinct tribes of Iberians: the Indigetes in Empordà, the Cerretani in Sardinia, and the Ernesans in the Val d'Aran. At this time, the Greek trading city of Emperies was founded on the coast by the Greek city of Phasia in the 6th century BC. Roman times. Romanization brought a second, distinct stage in the ancient history of Catalonia. Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio Calvus arrived in Empúries, with the objective of cutting off the sources of provisions of Hannibal's Carthaginian army during the Second Punic War. After the Carthaginian defeat, and the defeat of various Iberian tribes who rose up against Roman rule, 195 BC saw the effective completion of the Roman conquest of the territory that later became Catalonia, and Romanization began in earnest. The various tribes were absorbed into a common Roman culture and lost the distinct characteristics, including differences of language. Most of what is now Catalonia first became part of the Roman province of Hispania. After 27 BC, they became part of Tarraconensis, whose capital was Tarraco. The arrival of Roman administrative and institutional structures led to the development of a network of cities and roads, the adoption of agriculture based on cereals, grapes, and olives, the introduction of irrigation, the development of Roman law, and the adoption of the Latin language. From late antiquity to feudalism, Visigothic and Muslim rule, the crisis of the 3rd century affected the whole Roman Empire, and gravely affected the Catalan territory, where there is evidence of significant levels of destruction and abandonment of Roman villas. This is also the period of the first documentary evidence of the arrival of Christianity, while archaeological evidence shows the recovery of some urban nuclei, such as Barcino, Tarraco, and Giranda. The previous situation was not restored. The cities became smaller and constructed defensive walls. In the 5th century, as part of the invasion of the Roman Empire by Germanic tribes, the Visigoths, led by Ethelwulf, installed themselves in the Tarraconensis, and when in 475 the Visigothic king Euric formed the Kingdom of the Losa, he incorporated the territory equivalent to present-day Catalonia. Later, the Visigothic kingdom lost most of its territory north of the Pyrenees and shifted its capital to Toledo. The Visigothic kingdom of Hispania lasted until the early 8th century. In 714, the Umayyad forces reached the northeastern part of the peninsula, where some important clashes took place. In 720, Narbonne fell to the joint Arab-Berber forces, followed by the conquest of the remains of the Visigothic kingdom, Septimania. The last Visigothic king, Ardo, died in the theatre of war. Carolingian conquest. After repelling Muslim incursions as far north as Tours in 732, the expanding Frankish Empire set about creating a buffer zone of Christian counties in the south that became known as the Marca Hispanica, or the Spanish March. The first county to be conquered from the Moors lied in the former area of Septimania that became Roussillon, following the conquest of Narbonne. In 785 the county of Girona on the south side of the Pyrenees was taken. Ribagorza and Palas were linked to Toulouse and were added to this county around 790. Urgel and Cerdagne were added in 798. The first records of the county of Empúries are from 812, but the county was probably under Frankish control before 800. After a series of struggles, Charlemagne's son Louis took Barcelona from the Moorish emir in 801 and set up the county of Barcelona. The counts of the Marca Hispanica had small outlying territories, each ruled by lesser miles with armed retainers, who owed allegiance through the count to the emperor, or to his Carolingian and Ottonian successors. At the end of the 9th century, the Carolingian monarch Charles the Bull designated Wilfrid the Hairy, a a noble descendant of a family from Conflent and son of the earlier Count of Barcelona, son of Fredon, as Count of Sardinia and Urgell. After Charles's death, Wilfrid became the Count of Barcelona and Girona as well, which brought together the greater part of what was later to become the Catalan territory. And although on his death the counties were divided again among his sons, except for one brief period, Barcelona, Girona, and Osona continued to be unified under one count. As a result, Wilfrid made its title hereditary and founded the dynasty of the House of Barcelona, which ruled Catalonia until 1410. The rise and fall of the Alauers. During the 10th century, the Catalan counts became increasingly independent of the Carolingian rulers. Fealty broke down entirely when the Count Borrell II made official in 987 when he failed to swear fealty to Hugh Capet, the first Capetian monarch of the emerging French kingdom. In those years, the population of the Catalan counties began to increase for the first time since the Muslim invasion. During the 9th and 10th centuries, the counties increasingly became a society of Alauers, peasant proprietors of small, family-based farms, who lived by subsistence agriculture and owed no formal feudal allegiance. The 11th century was characterized by the development of feudal society, as the miles formed links of vassalage over this previously independent peasantry. The middle years of the century were characterized by virulent class warfare. Seigneurial violence was unleashed against the peasants, utilizing new military tactics, based on contracting well-armed mercenary soldiers mounted on horses. By the end of the century, most of the Alauers had been converted into vassals. This coincided with the weakening of the power of the counts and the division of the Spanish marches into more numerous counties, which gradually became a feudal state based on complex fealties and dependencies. For the time of the triumph of Ramon Berenguer over the other Catalan counts, the Counts of Barcelona stood firmly as the link in a web of fealty between the Catalan counts and the crown. First references to the name Catalonia. The term Catalonia is first documented in an early 12th century Latin chronicle called the Liber Maiolianus, where Ramon Berenguer III, Count of Barcelona, is referred to as Catalanicus Heroes, Rector Catalanicus, and Dux Catalanensis. Some of the manuscripts that remain today suggest that Catalonia derives from the name Gothia, land of the Goths. Since the origins of the Catalan counts, lords and people were found in the ancient March of Gothia, known as Gothia, whence Gothland and Gt, Gothalindia and Gt, Gothalania and Gt, Catalonia theoretically derive. During the Middle Ages, Byzantine chroniclers claimed that Catalonia derives from the local medley of Goths with Alans, initially constituting a Gothalania. Alternatively, the name may come from the word Catalan, as the area had many fortifications. Besides, the names Catalonia, Cathalania, and Catalanensis are easily found referring to a geographical area and its inhabitants related to the people of the Languedoc, Catalonia, Aragon and Castile. Dynastic union with Aragon. Until the middle of the 12th century, the successive counts of Barcelona tried to expand their domain in multiple directions. Ramon Berenguer III incorporated the county of Besalú, part of the county of Empúries, all of the county of Sardinia, and also the county of Provence through his marriage to Duce of Provence. The Catalan Church, for its part, became independent of the bishopric of Narbonne by restoring the archiepiscopal see of Tarragona. In 1137 the crown of Aragon was created by the marriage of Queen Petronilla of Aragon and Ramon Berenguer IV, Count of Barcelona. Ramon Berenguer IV used the title Comes Barcanonensis as his primary title and Princeps Aragonensis as his second title, beside his wife who retained her title of Regina. The son and heir, Alfonso II of Aragon, consolidated created the dynastic union as Rex Aragonum, comes Barcinone Marchio Provinci. Catalonia and Aragon retained their distinct traditional rights, and Catalonia its own personality, with one of the first parliaments in Europe, the Catalan courts. In addition, the reign of Ramon Berenguer IV saw the Catalan conquest of Lleida and Tortosa, completing the unification of all of the territory that comprises modern Catalonia. This included a territory to the south of the historic Spanish Marches, which became known as Catalonia Nova and which was repopulated with Catalans by the end of the 12th century. Expansion. Catalonia became the base for the Aragonese crown's sea power, which came to dominate a maritime empire that extended across the western Mediterranean after the conquest of Valencia, the Balearic Islands, Sardinia, and the accession in Sicily of the kings of Aragon. This period saw a large increase of maritime trade in Catalan ports, particularly of the Aragonese crown's leading city, Barcelona. At the end of the 12th century, a series of pacts between the crowns of Aragon and Castile delimited the zones that the two would each attempt to conquer from Muslim-ruled kingdoms. To the east, in 1213, the defeat and death of Peter II of Aragon in the Battle of Muret put an end to the project of consolidating the Aragonese influence and power over Provence. His successor James I of Aragon did not fully consolidate his power until 1227. Once he consolidated his inherited realm, he began a series of new conquests. Over the course of the next quarter-century he conquered Majorca and Valencia. The latter became a new state, the Third Kingdom, associated with the Crown of Aragon, with its own court and a new fuero, the First of Valencia. In contrast, the Majorcan territory, together with that of the counties of Sardinia, Vallespir, Capcir and Roussillon and the city of Montpellier, were left as a kingdom for his son James II of Majorca as the Kingdom of Majorca. This division began a period of struggle that ended with the annexation of that kingdom by the Crown of Aragon in 1344 by Peter IV the Ceremonious. The Principality of Catalonia saw a prosperous period at the end of the 13th century and the beginning of the 14th. The population increased, Catalan culture expanded into the islands of the western Mediterranean. The reign of Peter III of Aragon included the conquest of Sicily and the successful defense against a French crusade. His son and successor Alfonso conquered Minorca, and Peter's second son James II, who first succeeded to the throne of Sicily and then succeeded his older brother as King of Aragon, conquered Sardinia under James II, and Catalonia was the center of the flourishing Aragonese Empire. At the same time, the Principality of Catalonia developed a complex institutional and political system based in the concept of a pact between the estates of the realm and the king. Laws had to be approved in the General Court of Catalonia, one of the first parliamentary bodies of Europe that banned the royal power to create legislation unilaterally. Since 1283, the courts were composed of the three estates, were presided over by the King of Aragon, and approved the constitutions, which created a compilation of rights for the citizenship of the Principality. In order to collect general taxes, the courts of 1359 established a permanent representation of deputies, called Deputation of the General and later sometimes known as Generalitat, which gained an important political power in the next centuries. The second quarter of the 14th century saw crucial changes for Catalonia, marked by a succession of natural catastrophes, demographic crises, stagnation and decline in the Catalan economy, and the rise of social tensions. The reign of Peter the Ceremonial was a time of war. The annexation of Majorca, the quelling of a rebellion in Sardinia, a rebellion by Aragonese Unionists, and an Aragonese-Castilian war. These wars created a delicate financial situation, in a framework of demographic and economic crisis, to which was added a generation later a crisis of succession generated by the death in 1410 of Martin I without a descendant or a named successor. A two-year interregnum progressively evolved in favor of a candidate from the Castilian Trastamara dynasty, Ferdinand of Antequera, who after the Compromise of Caspe, was named Ferdinand I of Aragon. Ferdinand's successor, Alfonso V, promoted a new stage of Aragonese expansion, this time over the Kingdom of Naples, over which he finally gained dominion in 1443. At the same time, though, he aggravated the social crisis in the Principality of Catalonia, both in the countryside and in the cities. The outcome of these conflicts was the 1462 Remenca rebellion, a peasant rebellion against seigneurial pressures, which led to a 10-year civil war that left the country exhausted. The Remenca conflict did not reach any definitive conclusion, and from 1493 France formally annexed the counties of Roussillon and Sardinia, which it had occupied during the conflict. Ferdinand II of Aragon finally resolved the major grievances of the Remences with the Sentencia Arbitral de Guadalupe in 1486, profoundly reformed Catalan institutions, recovered without war the northern Catalan counties, and increased active involvement in Italy. In 1481, the Catalan courts approved the Constitutio del Observaca, which established the submission of royal power to the laws of the Principality of Catalonia. Crown of Aragon union with Crown of Castile. Ferdinand's 1469 marriage to Isabella I of Castile brought about a dynastic union of the Crown of Aragon with Castile. After the 1512 invasion of the Kingdom of Navarre in 1516, the monarchies were formally united into a single monarchy of Spain. Each kingdom of the monarchy conserved its political institutions and maintained its own courts, laws, public administration, and separate coinage of money. When Christopher Columbus made his discovery in the Americas during a Spanish-sponsored expedition, and began to shift Europe's trade and economic center of gravity from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic Ocean, undermining Catalonia's economic and political importance, Aragonese and Catalan power in the Mediterranean would continue, but efforts to achieve further Spanish conquests in Europe itself largely stopped, and the maritime expansion into the Atlantic and the conquest of territories in the Americas was not a Catalan enterprise. Castile and Aragon were separate states until 1716 in spite of a shared crown, and the newly established colonies in the Americas and Pacific were Castilian, administered as appendages of Castile, until in 1778 Seville was the only port authorized to trade in America, and until the dynastic Union Catalans, as subjects of the Crown of Aragon, had no right to trade directly with the Castilian-ruled Americas. In the 16th century, the Catalan population began a demographic recovery and some measure of economic recuperation. The reign of Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor as Charles I of Spain, was a relative harmonious period, during which Catalonia generally accepted the new structure of Spain, despite its own marginalization, as the focus of Spanish maritime power and of European rivalry shifted to the Atlantic. The Kingdom of Valencia became the most important kingdom of the former Aragonese Confederation, eclipsing Barcelona. The reign of Philip II marked the beginning of a gradual process of stagnation of Catalan economy, language, and culture. Among the most negative elements of the period were a rise in piracy along the coasts and banditry in the interior.